I think we're live. Yep, yes we are. Hello guys, it's Cassim. Welcome to another episode, and I think we're on episode number 4 of the Man to Man podcast. Really want to firstly start off by thanking you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching this, I really appreciate it. I know that many of you are busy. I know that we're obviously going through a pandemic at the moment, so I really appreciate you taking the time to spend the next kind of hour or so with me, and I'm hoping that in the next hour I can say something to you, whether it be a strategy, whether it be a philosophy, whether it be, I don't know, an idea that can help you elevate your life to that next level, and can hopefully help you become a higher, fuller expression of who you're capable of becoming. Right, a lot's happened. Many of you will probably have noticed I actually didn't do this podcast last week, and the reason why I didn't do the podcast was because I was actually ill last week. Before you even try anything, it was not coronavirus. What basically happened was that I went and bought. Basically, when I was working in I've been working in restaurants since I was 16. And when I used to work in a place there was a restaurant that I used to work in for like 3 years called Strada, and when I worked there, they had this dish. It was called a risotto frutti di mare. Basically, it was just like a risotto with loads of seafood, so clams and mussels and prawns, that kind of thing. And I don't know what happened, but last week at the beginning of it, I really wanted to have this, but I'm not really such a great fan of risotto. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to have a linguine version of this. So I'm going to have like a pasta version with loads of seafood. So I went out and I bought seafood from Tesco's. I went and bought the linguine pasta. Now, what I'd forgotten was that when on the list of things, when I was looking online, on the list of things that I had to buy, there was chili flakes, and I forgot to buy the freaking chili flakes. And when I got home, I was tasting the food. So I'd cooked everything, and I was tasting the food, and I was like, oh crap. It doesn't taste spicy, because I remembered it being spicy, and I was like, crap, I've forgotten the chili flakes. And so I thought, right, okay, do I have anything else as chili? So what I did was that I found chili powder, and I've poured loads of it in there. I just thought, well, there's chili powder, it's not loads of it, it can't really be that bad. Basically what ended up happening was the next day I ate it, and I thought, boy, this is spicy, right? Basically I poured too much chili powder in it, and I woke up and I ate it, and I thought, boy, this is spicy. The next morning I woke up, and my neck had all swollen up. I was sweating, mate. I'd lost a plot. And I went to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist was kind of saying to me, mate, this is a mistake. What have you been doing, etc., etc. And that was really interesting. So my apologies, I didn't do the podcast last week, but that kind of leads me actually to something that I thought might be interesting for you guys for me to talk about, which is as a first thing today. There's actually loads of things I want to talk to you about, but as a thing to talk to you firstly about, I thought this might be interesting. You know, I have a lot of friends who are in various businesses and various careers where people go to them to find solutions to their problems, and many of them tell me, and I can say this as somebody who's training to be a counsellor, that as a counsellor, when somebody comes to you with a problem, usually the problem that they have is masking something else. Usually the problem that they have is not the actual problem that they're kind of coming to you with. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, which is really important, I have found in my own life, and I'm just speaking obviously from opinion, is I've basically found that it's really, really important in life to always try to go down to the root of whatever is causing the problem in our life. So many times, if for example your relationship is not very good, the tendency for many of us is to blame the fact that we are not very good at communicating. But actually, what might be the root problem of this is the fact that one of the partners cheated 3 years ago and the person hasn't actually forgiven them. And the person said, for example, I'll forgive, but I won't forget, which basically means they haven't actually forgiven, right? Because forgiving obviously means you have to actually forgive somebody, right? You have to set them free. And whenever I hear people talking about, I forgive but I don't forget, well, that means you haven't forgiven, because I understand the forgetting part, but you can't move on unless you've actually fully forgiven. Anyway, without me getting too much into the details of that, what will usually happen is the man or the woman will then be almost on alert. They will be in a heightened sense of being. And what will then eventually happen is that everything that the other person does in the relationship is suspicious. Everything that they do, it almost winds up this person, because obviously they haven't forgiven, because obviously they haven't healed over that cheating. And, you know, sometimes you will have people where they will come to a counsellor and they will say that their partner is perhaps not performing very well in the bedroom, and they've come along to the counsellor and they don't know what to do and they think it's their fault. But actually, you may think that the problem is the sex, but the problem isn't the sex, because that person might be, for example, dealing with financial problems, right, that they're avoiding to tell their missus. Do you see what I mean? There's usually something else that is causing the problem. And the way that I'd like to try and explain this to people is, when you go to the doctors and you go and speak to your doctor, the first thing your doctor asks you is, where have you been and what have you been doing? So you say to the doctor, doctor, I've got a headache. Most of us, the tendency that we have, and I speak from experience, when I go to the doctor and I have a headache, all I want the doctor to do is to give me some pills. All I want him or her to do is to basically solve my problem. But usually when I go to the doctors, the doctor will be asking me stupid questions like, where have you been? What have you been eating? Have you been exercising? All of this kind of stuff. And to me, it seems so irrelevant. But what he's actually trying to do is he's trying to go back to the root cause of what has caused you to actually end up like this. So how do I put this? So for example, I was actually saying this to my mum. I went to see my mum the other day and I was saying to my mum that a lot of people, when they come to me and they have a problem, they think, and the metaphor that I use with my mum is like, they will have like a fire alarm going off in their house, and most people will think that the fire alarm is the issue. All of us know that a fire alarm going off in your house is not the issue. Well, what's the issue? The issue is that there is smoke in the house. Now, if you keep following that back, eventually you will find out that somewhere there is a fire, right? And the fire is actually the problem. The problem isn't the fire alarm going off. The problem is the fire. But you have to delve through so much shit to get to the point where you actually realize that actually, oh, it's actually the fire that's causing causing the smoke. Then the smoke is causing for the fire alarm to go off. And essentially that's one of the things that I don't know whether that's going to be useful to you or not, but maybe at the moment you are experiencing a problem in your life, and when you look at it from the outside, this problem has been occurring over and over and over and over again, and you're not really too sure what the problem is. My advice to you is go to the source. Keep going backwards and following. For example, if you are finding that you haven't got a very good relationship with your parents, the problem isn't the fact that your mum is an angry person, right? The fact, if you do not get on with your partner's parents, that's not, the problem isn't that they are cynical or they're rude. That's not actually the problem. If you follow the problem back and try to understand it, you will find many times they are operating from fear, they are scared, something, they've maybe got themselves in a similar situation before, and you are triggering, or your behavior is triggering something in them. Do you see what I mean? So usually the thing that you're seeing isn't actually the problem. It's usually something else, and you have to go way back to determine what the actual problem is. I met with my friend Todd yesterday, who lives in Bristol, and Todd basically works in there is a really big hospital in Bristol. I don't know the name of it. Most of you will probably know it. But his job is to basically, what did he say to me? His job is to, so when you go into a hospital and you need to be assessed on whether you need to go into surgery or not, his job is to basically assess what kind of surgery you will need, how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost the company, because Todd said something to me yesterday which I didn't even know. I didn't realise that a lot of NHS hospitals are not actually part of the NHS. They have the NHS logo, but they're actually privately owned, which I didn't know. Maybe you knew that, but I actually didn't know that. Anyway, so Todd was saying to me that that's his job, and many times he has to go into these meetings, and I said, what meetings? And he goes, well, what happens is, Cass, we have almost like a 5-strike rule, because what will happen is we will have what they call frequent flyers. I was like, what the hell are frequent flyers? He goes, frequent flyers are basically people who come into the hospital all the time, and we see them for the same issue again and again and again and again. So, for example, he was telling me that many times cocaine addicts come in and it was actually fascinating what he was telling me. So basically, I didn't know that cocaine, if you inject cocaine is got so much bad shit in it that when you put it into a vein, it actually destroys the bit of the vein where you've injected it, so you can no longer use that part of the vein. And then he said to me that there's this word called tracing. So he said that one of the things when you go to the doctors will ask you whether you have good veins. The reason why they're asking you whether you have good veins or not is to determine whether you've had previously a history of injecting yourself. Because if you don't know what that question, most people have no idea why a doctor would be asking them about why they have good veins. That's why the doctor is asking you whether you have good veins. If you've been a coke addict, you will know that clearly, that the difference between what's good veins and bad veins. I didn't even have any clue. I'd always wondered why it is that doctors are always asking about good veins and bad veins, but now I know. Anyway, so he said that there are these people who are frequent flyers, people who literally come in and out of the hospital for the same issues. And when there is like a 5-strike rule or something like that, and where if the same person keeps being admitted for the same thing, what will usually happen is that the senior members of staff will sit down and they will start asking questions. And the question is, why does this person keep coming in? So he said to me, one of the common things that they have and they get is they have a lot of women who come in and they've got like broken bones, they've got fractures in their head, they've been cut, and so the person will usually give all these reasons. They'll say, oh, I fell over, I cut myself, I'm prone to accidents, whatever. But if the same person keeps coming in over and over and over and over again for the same kinds of issues or for the same issue, the hospital then know that the issue is no longer what the person is presenting. It is usually something else. And Todd said to me that usually if, for example, you have a woman who's coming in and she's got fractured bones and she's got a broken arm or got bruises all over her, it's because usually she's in a domestic abuse relationship. And she doesn't want to tell the people at the hospital, and then they need to determine what the hell's going on so that they don't keep treating this person and basically have them in a revolving door. And so that's something that I don't know whether is useful to you or not, but I thought it was interesting that usually the thing that we think is a problem actually really isn't the problem. Usually the problem is something completely different. If you're unhappy with your life at the moment, it isn't the fact that you don't have a lot of money. That's usually not the problem, right? The problem usually is something else. Maybe your relationship, there is something that I've always found really interesting where a lot of women complain about their husbands being at work a lot. And they think, well, the reason why my husband wants to be at work a lot is because he's busy or whatever. But usually that's not the reason. Usually he's cheating or having an affair. Usually he is trying to avoid his wife because he's in debt, or he's got a gambling issue, or he's dealing with a problem at work that he doesn't feel his wife is going to understand, or maybe he's in a situation where he's not too sure about his sexuality, or whatever it may be. Usually the thing that you see is not usually the issue. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Now, the second thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which again actually came from a conversation that I had with Todd. In fact, me and Todd spent most of yesterday talking about this. It's around being open-minded. So many of you have seen the title of what I named today, which is What the Beep is Humanism. So when I met Todd yesterday, I saw that he had a book with him. And obviously, being Cassim, and I read so many books, my first question was, what are you reading? What's this? I'd never in my whole life ever heard of humanism until yesterday when Todd was telling me. Anyway, point being is, he ended up explaining it to me, and what ended up happening was that he said to me, do you know what, Cass? I don't usually talk to people about humanism. Most people don't even know that I know anything about it. But you're one of the first people that I've ever had this conversation with, because you are so open-minded. And when we have a conversation, you are not looking to attack me or to tell me that I'm wrong. You are looking to find out a bit more about whatever it is that I talk to you about. And it really made me realise that I didn't even really, well, I guess I knew, but I'd never really thought about this in a massive way. I made a really conscious decision, and I actually live by this, and it's become a philosophy of mine, to have a mind which is open to everything and is attached to nothing. And what I essentially mean by that is I basically realise that whatever it is that I believe, whatever it is that I know, is one version of the truth, right? I discovered that basically, no matter how much information I think I have, no matter how much logical sense, whatever I think I know, it is possible for me to be wrong. It is possible for me to have the wrong information, right? And me and Todd were kind of talking about this, where we were saying, imagine going your whole life, maybe being a Muslim or being a Christian or being a Buddhist, and you spent all your life following that faith, and you demolished anybody and kind of trashed anybody who tried to beat you down and tried to challenge you on your belief, and then you get to heaven and you find out that you followed the wrong religion your entire life. Imagine that, right? And so I was just basically, me and Todd were talking about this, and we realised that so many of the problems in the world stem from a lack of people being open-minded, a lack of us as individuals having a mind where we actually are open to listening. I did some research and I found that as people, we will only listen for about 6 seconds, and then after about 6 seconds of having a conversation, we will then start thinking about an answer to reply to whatever it is that we're talking about, which means that we're not actually engaging in active listening. Active listening meaning that we're open to whatever the person is going to share with us. You know, a lot of us in life are kind of have already set what we actually believe. We've already set what we know. We've already set what our life is going to be like. We've already set what our beliefs are. And a lot of the many times, a lot of the conflict, if you actually look at a lot of the wars, right? If you look at anyone who's been an evil dictator or anyone who we'd call so-called evil, if you look at the reason why they managed to even get in a position where they were able to manipulate people, you know, let's, for example, use somebody like Idi Amin. Idi Amin in Uganda, if you don't know him, Google him. Or in fact, let's not use Idi Amin because some of you may not know who Idi Amin is. But let's use somebody like Hitler because most of us know him. You know, part of the reason why somebody like Hitler was able to do the things that he was able to do, and I say this partly, clearly this isn't the whole thing, is because he did not have the sense and the mindset of being open enough to listen to the people around him, to listen to other people's opinions, to listen, to look at how his actions were affecting other people, right? To look at the way in which when he went into other people's space, how he made them personally feel. Now, I obviously know that some of us have a leaning towards the dark world and some of us have a leaning towards evil or whatever it is. But I think that so many of us in life, I'm telling you guys, that if you actually look at like the conflicts between friends, if you look at the conflicts in relationships, a lot of them start from the fact that one of the parties believes that they're right and the other person's wrong. And they're so definitive on what they believe and they're so definitive on what they stand for that they just won't even consider the other person's opinion. They just won't, right? I'm sure many of you who are listening to me, you've been in situations in your life where you have, you knew you were right and you were having a conversation with somebody and you were giving them logical facts and you were giving them evidence and you backed everything up, but no matter what you said, they just didn't care. They did, and they knew that you were right and they just didn't care. And a lot of us are actually go through life in that way. And the thing that I think is really interesting, which is what I was saying to Todd yesterday, is that some of us know we're wrong, but we would rather live in ignorance and rather fail so as to prove to somebody else that they're not right than be right. Let me put this another way. Many of us would rather win than be effective, right? Many of us would rather be in a relationship and look great, but instead of not being in a relationship, but being happier. Many of us would rather win an argument with our partner, but then lose the war, and eventually those little cracks along in the arguments and the conversations we've had, which eventually will lead to the divorce. Because, you know, I've said to so many people, particularly many of you know that I interview people who've been married for 15 years or more. And one of the questions that I'm always asking them is, what's your secret? What do you know that the rest of us do not know, right? And many of the people I spoke to had actually been divorced before, weirdly enough. And one of the things that I was, as I asked them, one of the things that they're constantly saying to me is, Cassim, part of the reason why I got divorced last time was because not of one thing, but because I did not pay attention to several things along the way. I didn't deal with stuff when I needed to. There were small things like we'd have an argument over whether we're going to go see my mum or not over the Easter bank holiday. We would have an argument over do we spend our money on painting the house or going on holiday, things like this, but we never really resolve them. And these little arguments along the way are what causes people to get to a situation where they end up getting divorced. And a lot of it really starts from people not being open, people not having a space around them which allows people to come to them without judgment. People say to me all the time, and actually, one of the reasons why you see me talking to you today, and why I decided to become a counsellor, and I didn't even realise this before about myself, is I meet a lot of people who don't know me, people who I have no associations with, and those people tell me stuff about them that you really shouldn't tell people, right? Like, I think many of you will agree, there's some things in your life that you just shouldn't tell a random person who you've just met for the first time. But basically, people do that all the time to me. People tell me stuff that you really should not be telling a stranger. Things about their sex life, their marriage, all kinds of things. And I became, and my friend was telling me this actually, which is why I came to realize this. I came to realize that part of the reasons why people share with me so much about themselves is because I'm not a judgmental person, man. Like, I am open to people coming into my space and feeling comfortable that if they share something with me, that I'm not going to tear them down. I may not agree with them, but I'll tell you what, I'm willing to have a conversation. I'm willing to listen to their perspective because, look, guys, I don't know that I'm right. Who the fuck am I to say that I'm right? I don't know anything. All I basically know is what I've experienced, what I've felt, heard or seen, right? And what I've studied or read or have been told or have watched on TV. That is essentially it. Now, when you consider all the experiences of all that everybody on this planet has had, and you consider all the knowledge that is available on this planet in comparison to what I know, come on, guys. How can I possibly say so definitively on stuff that I know stuff? I can't. And in fact, part of you've probably noticed that the way I share with you guys has changed over over the last kind of 3 or 4 years. Because back in the days when I first started coaching and speaking and teaching to you guys, I used to be very definitive and I used to say you should do this and this is the way. But I got to the point where I realised, hold on a minute, Cass, how do you know? Just because something is worked for you or is worked for somebody else, it doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for this person. You can share with somebody and you can give them a strategy or you can give them a piece of knowledge, but ultimately what they do with it is their choice, is their decision. It isn't your job to tell them how they should be living or what they should believe. That is their prerogative. That is their choice. And I think, this, I was writing down, in fact, I'm preparing at the moment to do like a workshop that I'm going to start doing in a couple of months, which is all about how to have an edge today. I think I call it something like how to have an edge leading up to 2050. And one of the things that I talk about as having, if you want to have an edge, if you want, look, we all live in the same world. When the government is, when a certain government, whether it be Conservatives or Labour, is in Parliament at the same time, is in Parliament, whoever is in Parliament is relevant. It affects all of us at the same time, right? So we're all essentially, when it rains in Reading, it rains on all of us, right? So what I basically realised was that we're all essentially going to experience the same kinds of conditions, there or thereabouts. So I wanted to know what would allow me to have an edge, what would allow people to win, what would allow people to be able to accelerate their change. And one of the things that I talk about is I talk about having an open-mindedness. And the reason why I talk about having an open mind is because we live in a world which Peter Drucker called the era of the 3 C's, which is accelerated change, overwhelming complexity, and tremendous competition. Which essentially means that we live in a world today, right, where if you and I go and apply for a job, the job does not longer go to people in that company or in that little vicinity where the company is. People in India, people in Germany, people in France can apply for the same job. Why? Because everything's gone online, right? So today, you know, I work in Tesco's, and in Tesco's, fuck me, there is Chinese, there is Nepalese, there's Polish, there's Lithuanians, there's Ukrainians, there's people from Bulgaria, there's people from Ghana. I was talking to a guy from Ghana today, right? There is English lads, there's people from all kinds of walks of life. And I basically realized that in order for you to connect with people, in order for you to move and accelerate your progress, you're going to need to be able to meet and connect with people who are completely different from you. Because if you cannot be open enough that people want to even approach you from other cultures, you're going to be fucked. You know, I say to people all the time that a lot of the knowledge that you need, people who have it, or the skills that you need in order to help your dream become a reality, may not come from people who look like you or who believe the same things as you. They just won't. I mean, think about it. When somebody like, let's think of a company that's recently started. So when you think of a big company like Under Armour, or in fact, let's take a company like Gymshark. Many of you know of Gymshark, right? The gym company in the UK. When that company started out, that guy who started Gymshark, who's a guy, I think he started at like 21 years of age, that dream that he started, if he only wanted to employ people who look like him, who were from the same background as him, he would be fucked. Because he would need to set up things like IT. He would need to set up apps. He would need to have people who can speak languages, because obviously Gymshark is an international organization now. In order to realize his dream, he would need to get people who spoke French. He would need to get people who spoke Italian if he really wanted to make his dream become a reality. And imagine if he only wanted to stick with people and work with people who are only from the same background as him. His organization, there is no way it would have been able to grow to the size that it has if he only wanted to stick with people. And I've got to tell you, many of us are still operating from that space. The space of, I'm just going to stick with black people. I mean, can you believe that some of us live in the UK, and I'm not talking about rural parts of the UK, like up in Scotland somewhere, where, of course, like there's not going to be very many black people, very many Nepalese people. Where I live in Reading in Berkshire, there are people, even though it is one of the most densely international places that I've ever been, there is still people, black friends of mine, who do not know any Nepalese people, who don't know any person who is outside of the black community. And it fascinates me. it bamboozles me how somebody can literally have a life where they do not have a single person in their life who they know which is outside of their race. It bamboozles me. And so what I would share with you, and again, this is what a piece of advice. It's up to you what you do with your life. I would start opening yourself up. And I mean, it's almost got to be an internal mentality, because I guess for me, I don't say to people I'm an open-minded kind of person. People just approach me because I'm open to them. You know, I work in Tesco's, and guys, I've got to tell you, I joined Tesco's like, what was it? 4 months ago? 5 months ago. And in that time, I know more people in Tesco's than people who've been there 3 years. I've spoken to more. In fact, a woman came up to me the other day and she said to me, I was talking to my husband about you. And I said, talk to me about your husband? Why? And she goes, because you speak to everybody. Because you ask people questions. Because you know a lot about people, and a lot of the other people who work here don't speak to anybody. Now, I'm not telling you that, guys, because I'm trying to be big-headed or brag about myself. I'm telling you that as a lead. I'm showing you that that's where we want to be going towards. We want to be the kinds of people where, do Nepalese people find you approachable? Right? Do Nepalese people want to come up to you and ask you what you are like, or what your background is, or what where you're from? Because I've found that, look, the reality is most people are closed-minded, and so we ourselves are going to have to start first. This is why I say to people, you know, that one of the things, in fact, weirdly enough, in that workshop that I'm going to start doing on giving yourself an edge leading up to 2050, I talk about leadership as being one of those. Leading, being the person who sets the footprints in the sand instead of waiting for other people to leave footprints in the sand. You know, going ahead first instead of waiting. And the reality is, guys, that so many of us are just waiting. Many of us are waiting for something to happen, and then we will take action, right? If they speak to us, then we will speak to them. And that kind of mentality is really what causes so many conflicts, right? It's in a relationship, that's what happens when all of a sudden this relationship begins to decay. Because one person says, until he or she apologizes, I'm not apologizing. Now you have an issue, right? And so when you open up the dialogue and, you know, in a relationship, if we're speaking about a relationship, and say, look, I would love to see your perspective. Clearly, I've said something, or I've done something that has hurt you. And I'm here for you, and the reason why I came into this space and into this connection and into this relationship with you was because I wanted to be there for you. But somehow I've done something to hurt you from your perspective, which wasn't intentional. But I also want to add that I also feel, and I'm also hurting, and I'm also in pain. But let me firstly come to you and ask you what you're feeling. Let me come to you and ask you how I've made you feel. And I've found when you come to these kinds of things from that space, people are a lot more open to sharing with you backwards, because you have allowed them to suffer less. You've allowed them to not hurt as much. But when you turn your back on them and you say to them that they need to come to you first before you do anything, it shuts down the conversation. I don't know. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree, but I was just thinking about that anyway. So that's one of the first things that I wanted to talk about. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is, you know, many of you know that I do my workshop on Sundays, the goal setting workshop. And one of the things that I'm struggling with, and I'm trying to kind of see how we can improve this and how we can get over this, is around people not trying stuff, giving things a go. And I guess it kind of connects to the first point that I've just talked about, of open-mindedness. But I don't know, maybe you disagree with me, but I've just found that so many of us don't try anything. So many of us, we see a business opportunity and think, I'd love to set up a business, and we don't even ever try it. We already say it's impossible. We already say it's not going to happen before we even get out of the gates, before we've even done any research, before we even talk to anyone. So many people see a girl that they like and they're like, nah, it's never going to happen. Instead of actually giving it a go, speaking to the chick, you don't know, she might be interested. So many of us see a job opportunity, maybe to get up into management, but we never give it a go. We never apply. We don't even apply. We're like, I can't get the job. How do you know? Why don't you grow into the job? And so I guess one of the things that I just wanted to share with you guys, and I would ask you to think about is, have you got into the habit of being the kind of person who never tries anything? Being the kind of person who never goes out there and puts your foot into the sand, or into the ocean, I should say. In my book that I'm writing at the moment, I give this metaphor of what so many people do, which is, I give this metaphor where I say that if you've ever had children in your family, one of the things that you will know is that you might have had an experience where you've taken them to the beach. And when you take children to the beach, you get two kinds of kids. When you get to the beach, there's one child that gets his or her swimming costume on and runs straight into the beach, straight into the water. There's no hesitation. They don't care how cold it is. They just run in and they just jump into it. And then there's another type of child when you take them to the beach who basically walks up to the water. They put a little bit of their toe in. They then it's too cold. Then they run away from the waves and they go back and they basically just keep towing and they basically never commit to anything. They never give it a go. They never jump in there. And I think so many people in life, that's how we end up living our lives. And in fact, I say to men all the time that if you really want respect from other men particularly, the way you get respect from other men is one of the ways is through competence. Men respect other men who are good at something. The issue is that you can't be good at something if you've never committed yourself to anything. If you've never committed yourself to anything, that means you've never practiced, you've never failed. Because in order to get good at anything, you have to basically fail. You have to try it, then it doesn't work out, and then you learn, okay, so that doesn't work, so then you go again, then that time it doesn't work, then you refine it and learn from the other 2 times, and then you get better and better and better and better and better, right? It's a bit like sales. If you've never been in sales, the top salespeople did not just magically become the top salespeople. No, they started off, they learned skills and they learned tactics and strategies, and they tried them and it didn't work on that person, and they tried them on this person and it worked that time, and so they learned about what they did that worked, and then over a period of 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 years they become one of the top salespeople. But I think so many people, particularly guys, we just honestly, and if you don't believe me, ask yourself how many people you know in your own life who are competent. They are excellent. They are world class in an area of life, right? And, we may be bantering and we may joke and say, yeah, my friend's really good at getting girls. But, that's all very good. But unfortunately, that doesn't pay the bills, as most of us understand that, right? And we all know that eventually tapers off, right? Your ability to get chicks for most of us doesn't last forever, right? There's a shelf life on that. So I'm talking about the kind of competence that lasts, that gets better and better and better and better and better as you get older, you know? And I guess so. One of the things that I really want to encourage you to do in your own life is find an area, any area at all, man. Like anything. It doesn't even matter what it is. Just choose anything. I always say choose something obviously that you're interested in. Do you know what? Do you know the only reason why I can speak to you about this kind of stuff? So 6 years ago, I heard a man called Al Nightingale say these words. He said, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said. He said that if a man or a woman dedicates themselves to reading one book in any area, it can be poo, it can be flowers, it can be rap, it can be lighting, it can be producing, it can be singing. If you dedicate yourself to reading one book every single week over a 5-year period in that area, within 5 years, you will be among the top 5% experts in the world in that area. So that's what I did. That's literally what I did. I thought, what do I find really interesting? And I was like, I tell you what, I find kind of like motivation and psychology and things like that really interesting. That's what I did. So I decided, since from that day, I was going to read books on how people made it. I was fascinated by how people make it from the bottom to the top. Why do some people end up rich and some people end up poor? How is it that you can have two people born on a council estate and one ends up out of the council estate and the other one doesn't? I wondered why that was. And that is essentially what most of my videos are on. You've seen that's if you come where I live, as everybody always says, because they're actually shocked at the level of books that I have. I have literally thousands of books. Obviously, I've been reading way more than one book a week, right? Because what happens is, which most people don't understand, is the more books you actually read, the more you want to know, right? The more you read and the deeper your knowledge becomes, the more you want to know. It's like a rabbit hole. It gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And so, yeah, I would encourage you in your own life to find an area where you can be confident, to find an area where you can be good. And that's all going to begin with actually having the desire to try. You know, having the desire to be the best, having the desire to be a good father, having the desire to be a good husband, having the desire to be a good citizen, having the desire to be a role model to your brothers and sisters, having the desire to have a level of financial security that is around your family that nothing can ever penetrate or nothing can ever get through. It all starts with wanting to try. And I think we live in an age where nobody tries anything. Nobody commits to anything in life anymore. In fact, on my workshop on Sundays, that's one of the things that I say in one of the statements. I say that if you want to build an incredible life, you have got to get away from microwaving your life and microwaving stuff to you got to start building stuff. Building takes time, building takes effort. You've got to set foundations, you've got to get loads of trucks, you've got to get loads of equipment, you've got to manage the project. It is way harder. It is much easier to go down to McDonald's and get a Big Mac, large meal with a banana milkshake, the nuggets on the side, the sweet chili sauce with... Actually, do you know what? With a quarter pounder as well on the side. It is way easier to do that than to go home, Then to drive down to Tesco's, go and look through, park up, walk in, line up, get your mask on, go into Tesco's, look for the ingredients, go to the checkout, pay for the checkout, walk back to your car, take your mask off, drive home, park up, take the things out of your car, put them in your home, cut up all the ingredients, prepare them, cook the food. Then there is a waiting period for you to before the food cooks. That is way longer than driving down to McDonald's and getting what I mentioned. That's way easier, right? So, sorry, it's way harder, I should say. But it is more fulfilling. It is way more fulfilling to build something for yourself. And actually, particularly for men, you know, we live in an age today where most of you know that the highest suicide, the highest amount of the highest deaths that happen between ages 16 and 25 are to men due to their mental health, due to suicide, right? And part of that comes obviously from self-esteem. And we know, particularly for men, that when men have pride, when we have that pride in something that we've done, it gives us esteem. It builds our self-image up. And I think a lot of men today, we just don't do very many things which build up our self-esteem. We don't do very many things which build up who we are, which build up our the way we see ourselves. And when you are obviously constantly microwaving everything in your life, trying to win the lottery, trying to use Sky Bet to make money, it's no surprise that all of a sudden you feel powerless because you never win, right? You know, when you build something yourself, you take more care of it, which means you invest more time, which means you don't want it to fail, and you will do more to not let it fail. But when it's microwaved, what does it matter if it's crap or not, right? You haven't invested too much anyway, so if it fails, whatever. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you today. I don't know whether any of it's been useful or not, but I hope it has, in a way. And I don't know if you found it useful. You guys know what to do. Jump on my YouTube channel, Cassimotive, and subscribe to it. Like and share, all the usual stuff. You know what to do. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope it's been useful. Take care of yourselves. Keep positive. Try some of the things that I've shared with you today out. Maybe they might be useful for you in your own life. You know, be open-minded. Try things in your life. I hope it's been useful. Thank you so much for listening, guys, and I shall speak to you in next week's podcast. Bye for now.